Good morning and welcome to this Circular Economy Innovation Network Aluminium Group kickoff meeting. My name is AJ Kapadia and I am a Knowledge Transfer Manager within the materials team of Innovate UK KTN. I thank you for joining us. We have a packed agenda for you. So I'm just going to give a little welcome and introduction to today, and then Emma McKenna, my colleague Emma McKenna, head of Net Zero, is going to give you a talk about the aims and objectives of the Circular Economy Innovation Network. We then have some presentations from some esteemed speakers, high-level speakers from the aluminium industry. So we have Jan Lukowski from Alfed, Tom Giddings from Alpro, and Oliver Hawkins from Jaguar Land Rover. So an overall aluminium industry perspective, a focus down into sort of packaging, and then an end use perspective as well. We're running this program on behalf of Innovate UK, and it's got as you can imagine, like with any program, it's got deliverables that we have to meet and timelines. So my colleague L. Runton is going to go through that. We're then going to go through something called a Menti, which is like an online sort of whiteboard, you could call it, where we're going to just try to get out from you some opportunities and challenges. We're then going to take a short break, and then we go into the breakout rooms, where you can discuss in a little bit more detail what those opportunities and challenges are from circular design, circular recovery, and circular business models. We'll then do a little bit of a feedback, and then there's a sort of wrap up and next step. Again, a Menti, just to see if there's any further thoughts that you want to share after being in those breakout rooms. And then we'll close at 12 o'clock. We do have a virtual networking platform called Meeting Mojo. Hopefully you've got the link. My colleague Michael will put the link into the chat box if you've not seen it yet. I would really strongly encourage you to take advantage of this. I mean, we're living in the more and more in the virtual world. So that networking, that handshaking, that what do you do, what do I do, is there any way we can collaborate? All of that is a little bit more difficult in the virtual world. So here's an opportunity to meet like-minded people or potential partners and collaborators that you could work with. So just an introduction of who we are. So that's me on the left. And then my colleagues Emma and Elle, who are going to be speaking, are there, and then our invited speakers, Jan, Tom, and Oliver, who are going to be speaking a bit later. And then we've got when you go into the breakout rooms, you'll meet our facilitators, Debbie, Noha, and Kelly, who'll be in breakout room 1, 2, and 3. And of course we have Michael Foster in the background, who's doing all the magic to make today possible. So we thank him very much. So just a bit of a background, and I'm sure many of you will know this, and sort of why we're doing the project. I mean, aluminium is a superb circular material, one of the stars of the circular material world, really. My background is composite materials, and when I look at aluminium, I mean, with composite materials, we really can't touch aluminium, really. There's going to be a lot of consumer waste, and hence recycling going on. It is, whilst it's a very CO2 intensive material to produce, to recycle it is not very intensive. There's a lot of export and import going on of scrap aluminium. So that's something we could work on through this program. I'm sure you've seen this picture or pictures like it of what the sort of life cycle of aluminium is, and how circularity kind of fits into it. So that it's the kind of the round bit there that we are primarily focused on in this program. This is just another a picture of with a round circle in it, and just to point out really that in this program we're not just looking at the technical aspects, you know, the melting and the reforming or the machining, or you know, the kind of things that engineers and scientists are primarily concerned with, but we're looking at the whole life cycle, from design, including production and remanufacturing, but distribution, consumption, repair, reuse, and recycling, of course, as well. So business models and role of design is very important as well. So that's enough from me. I'll then next hand it over to Emma McKenna, who is our head of Net Zero, who's the overall instigator of this innovation network and program, and she's going to just give an overview of the aims and objectives of the Circular Economy Innovation Network. Over to you, Emma.
Thanks very much, AJ. Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm really pleased to have so many stakeholders from the aluminium community join us. If you could just flick on to the next slide, AJ, that would be great. So I kind of want to take a few moments this morning, but kind of before we kind of dive in really into the nuts and bolts of kind of, I suppose, really the potential opportunities and the challenges around aluminium, and kind of take a step back and really kind of think about why is it that we've actually set up this network? What is the kind of core purpose of it, and what is it we're really trying to achieve? I'm sure I don't need to tell anyone here that climate change is one of the most pressing problems of our time. It is affecting absolutely everyone, both within the UK and across the globe. And sometimes, you know, there's a lot of kind of unevenness and unfairness around kind of how different people and kind of different economies and different societies have been affected by it. And I really do believe that there is no more important priority for us as an economy or a society than our drive towards achieving net zero. And without taking urgent action, we're at risk of causing further irreversible damage to our planet, but not also to our planet, but also to the businesses that we represent and the organizations that we're from. If we don't take action now, then, you know, we are going to be impacted by the effects of climate change, of, you know, not taking action to become net zero, because of all the different impacts that, you know, and the detrimental impacts that net zero is having on us, and other kind of, you know, world problems that are currently going on at the moment. When we think about things like the energy crisis and inflation, you know, what is the benefits of kind of, you know, implementing kind of more sustainable models and circular economy is really kind of helping protect ourselves against that kind of price volatility and that uncertainty within the market. So there's a lot of opportunity here, not just in terms of kind of protecting the planet, also ourselves in terms of our own health and well-being, but also the economy and the businesses that we're from. And it's really, really important we start to think about that. So if we are to really kind of move forward towards achieving net zero, it's really important that we take swift and meaningful action right now. And we've seen that that's really, really important for us to be able to limit those temperature increases to 1.5 degrees above those pre-industrial limits that were set out in the Paris Agreement. And so net zero is really at the heart of what we do here at KTN, and it is one of the 5 strategic priorities we have as an organization. So as part of that, we took some work, we did a little bit of reflection to really understand the role that we felt we should have within that. And so it was, you know, felt to us that, you know, net zero is a really, really big challenge. How do we break that down? And also, as well as that, what's the different kind of approaches we can take to that? So often, and sorry, AJ, can I ask you to move on to the next slide? So often when we think about net zero, we often think about switching to renewable energies and decarbonizing those big systems like transport and heat and energy. And of course, that is absolutely so important. But switching to renewable energy is only half the story. It is vital, but would only address 55% of global emissions. If we are to reach net zero, we also need to change the way that we make, use products, materials, and consume things. And by adopting the principles of circular economy, such as eliminating waste and pollution, circulating products and materials, and regenerating nature, we can really tackle those emissions with industry, agriculture, and land use, and also that remaining 45%, which is so important. And the aluminium sector is part of that 45%. So what we really want to do, and what we've been looking at as part of this network, is really about how do we embed circular economy principles across the aluminium industry to help us achieve those much needed reduction of emissions and help us achieve net zero, both for the industry, but also as well for the UK and also the globe. AJ, can I ask you to move on to the next slide, please? So in terms of our approach as an organization, as I've mentioned, net zero is a really important priority for us as an organization. And it's a complex ecosystem within the UK. There's lots of different players that all have an important role to play. And so when we were kind of mapping out exactly what it is that we wanted to do within this space, this is what we come up with as our approach. And this is where we see kind of our talents lie and kind of our speciality in terms of what we do as an innovation network. So we really want to connect net zero innovators to establish industry. And so we want to identify those enabling technologies for net zero and do that connection and convene pace. We also want to accelerate deployment with the cross-sector learning. And we also want to accelerate the uptake and the scale up of those net zero technologies and innovations that are really required. In the UK, we're really good at starting up innovation, but not so much at scale. And as part of this network, we really want to look at ways in which we can change that. We also want to support the development of low carbon supply chains. So that's why we're really keen to work right across the aluminium sector and industry. And we know it's pretty incredibly complex. We know the value chain is not straightforward. We know that each of you have various different roles to play at different points within that value chain. So how can we help and work with you to support a much more low carbon supply chain across the UK? And from all of this kind of work in terms of being able to connect innovators with industry, solve those challenges, we know that we're going to be learning lots of insights. And how do we take that insight and feed that back in to policymakers to ensure that we've got the right policy environment that's really going to encourage innovation within the sector and across the board to really stimulate a circular economy here within the UK, within the aluminium sector, and help us achieve net zero. So as I've mentioned, sorry, AJ, can I get the next slide, please? As I've mentioned, decarbonization in itself is not enough. We also need to consider circular economy. And so our net zero strategy is kind of made up of 4 particular key themes. And then we'll see how this translates into the Circular Economy Innovation Network and why we've gathered you all here this morning. So as I've mentioned, decarbonization is a really important aspect of that. And we do look at kind of how we can reduce carbon emissions and the use of fossil fuels across energy, heat, transport, and agriculture and those industrial networks. And we know that's going to be a real biggie for the aluminium sector in terms of the amount of energy that's required across the value chain. But circular economy is also really important. We want to look at ways in which we can reduce the use of virgin fossil carbon through reuse, recycling, remanufacture, and the manufacture of non-fossil based products. We know that, and AJ's touched on already, how, aluminium is kind of the gold standard here in terms of kind of a material that has so much potential in being circular. We're seeing, recycling rates around aluminium being particularly high, but how do we look at other ways in which we can increase that? We know that, recycling aluminium requires huge amounts of energy. Is there opportunities around better design to allow the reuse and remanufacture of materials and products that use aluminium? Place is also a really important aspect of this. We know that, there's hubs of aluminium industry and sector activity in different pockets of the UK. How can we bring those different pockets into much more stronger clusters to allow that net zero innovation to thrive? And finally, we really want to enable action. This is not just a talk and shop. We really want to be able to connect those enabling technologies to the innovators and to the established industry to really create transformation, not just within the aluminium sector, but other sectors that are connected into that as well. And so that's our strategy. And through kind of this approach and through this strategy, we really want to translate that into what we're trying to do here with the Circular Economy Innovation Network. Next slide, please, AJ. So the Circular Economy Innovation Network, why you're all here today and kind of, the background I've been trying to build up towards is this network aims to create stronger, more collaborative and resilient industries working together to achieve net zero through circular innovation. By building new sector communities, focusing on circular design, business models, and circular recovery, we hope to empower industry members like you to come together to co-create a shared pathway for impact in achieving net zero through circular innovation. And Elle, a little bit later on, will talk exactly through what that process will look like and how we want to work with you to really create that change and that impact. AJ, next slide. So why was the Innovation Network set up? Well, through some of the work that we did and the business case we developed, we realized there was probably maybe perhaps within our approach in terms of what we were doing, a little bit of a gap around really trying to drive circular innovation. So we wanted to develop a business case around how we could address it, bringing in our expertise into the space. So what we found in terms across that, we wanted to apply specific principles. We wanted to consider the whole value chain. We wanted to ensure whatever we did as part of this innovation network, it would have no detriment to the environment. It would align with wider UK priorities and initiatives, which is why it's so important for us to have organizations like Alipro and Alfed here today, and have a scalable and transferable approach adopted. We identified that some of the key challenges in being able to drive circular innovation was innovations weren't being adopted at scale. As I mentioned a little bit earlier, we're really good at starting up, but not always so great at scaling up. And there's various different challenges that are linked towards that. And we'd love to hear a little bit more about that as well, and what your perspective is on why we're not being able to adopt innovation at scale in the breakout rooms a little bit later. But also, as well as that, whilst there's a growing commitment to net zero, and we're seeing multiple businesses make a pledge to net zero, there still is a little bit of uncertainty around how it can be achieved and also how circular economy can be used as a tool. And that's something we really want to address. So Elle will talk through this in a lot more detail, but what we want to do is create new circular challenge communities. This being one around aluminium, co-create a circular innovation action plan that will identify shared industry challenges, and then we'll go out and find and adopt solutions to those, and also launch a circular knowledge hub so we can share that knowledge and that innovation, not just across the aluminium sector, but across other industries and sectors as well that would benefit. And hopefully from this work, we'll be able to achieve greater collaboration within and across industries, so aluminium within the industry, but also working with the other industries in which you engage with, greater collaboration with it between academia and industry, and increased adoption of circular innovations, and as well as that, a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. And so that's what we're really, really trying to achieve here through this network. So I think that kind of brings it to a close in terms of what I was hoping to cover. And I'm going to hand you back to AJ now to introduce the other speakers, but we're really, really keen to kind of engage and listen to you later in the breakout rooms. But thanks again for being here. And I'm sure I'll be speaking to you a little bit later in the breakout room. Over to you, AJ.
Thank you very much, Emma. And I should just point out, Emma was instrumental in choosing aluminium and making the case for aluminium as being part of this innovation network. So I'm very grateful to her. So we next move on to our speakers. So can I start with Jan from the Aluminium Federation, Alfed. Over to you, Jan, if you just unmute and show us your camera.
Good morning, everyone. Okay. I'm going to give the background to the whole circular economy. My colleagues from Tom from Alupro is going to concentrate on the recycling elements, and Oliver's going to look at the industry downstream. So I'm going to look at the sort of the higher overview. Next slide, please. If you guys touch aluminium, if you guys work with aluminium, then you really ought to join the Aluminium Federation, Alfed. We start off with raw alloy. We work on alloy developments, product development, support you technically, politically, any which way. So that's the plug. Next slide, please. Right, let's talk a little bit about the aluminium industry. We are actually bigger than the steel industry. And Strathclyde University, the Fraser Institute, did an independent survey. So The facts are quite blunt. We employ about 40,000 people that across the UK, mainly in the West Midlands, but also in the Northwest. In terms of the industry, we contribute very, very roughly 2.9 billion in gross added value to the economy, and about 7 billion in equivalent jobs in the wider industry, and employ about 100,000. In terms of actual aluminium, we actually use somewhere between 3 and 4 million tons of aluminium. The problem is a lot of it comes imported as product, not classed as aluminium. Next slide, please. We're talking circular economy, but we need to step back right to what aluminium is and how used. Last year, total global aluminium used across the entire planet was 95 million tons, of which 30 million tons were recycled. Now, if you go back to the start of aluminium at the turn of the century and extrapolate it forward, based on the orders already placed and the production already available, by 2030, there'll be 120 million tons of aluminium used globally, of which about 40 million is going to be recycled. Based on that, and based on the amount of bauxite in the earth, we've got enough aluminium for about 80 years of primary production. The globe, particularly Europe and UK, are going to have to change to recycled. And Europe has already announced that by 2050, 50% of all aluminium used in Europe will be recycled. Today in the UK, we recycle roughly 1 million tons of aluminium. We are the star of the economy. On the downside, we actually export about 400,000 tons of scrap aluminium, predominantly to India. Next slide, please. Why recycle? Why the horrific picture about aluminium? Well, aluminium is primarily produced out of the ground, has quite a bad press. And predominantly the reason for that is that China is the dominant producer of aluminium. It produces roughly 50% of all the primary aluminium in the world. And like it or not, it uses coal-fired electricity and will continue to do that. So it's got a high carbon footprint, about 22 tons of carbon per ton of aluminium. In Europe, we're about 6.7 tons because we got hydro. So the skewed figure over the world globally is about 12 to 14 tons CO2 per ton of primary aluminium. Now, if you look at recycled aluminium, and the real opportunities are if we recycle single alloys down to that and we use hydrogen or electricity, we're almost net zero carbon footprint. Huge, huge opportunity. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of UK metal production, as I said, we use somewhere between 3 and 4 million tons of aluminium. In the UK, we have one primary producer, Loch Harbour. It's a hydroelectric scheme, extremely green, but only produces about 50,000 tons of aluminium. In terms of recycled aluminium, the UK recycling capacity is about 1 million tons. We actually have 19 recycling plants. The bigger ones are recycling 200,000 tons a year. Some of the smaller ones are 20,000 down to 5,000 tons. We also are very, very well self-sufficient because we've got master alloy production plants. These are the people that add the alloys, the refining agents to make alloyed aluminium. The bad news is that predominantly the whole recycling industry is gas-fired. The good news is the extrapolated figures in the UK show that we'll be recycling about 1.6 million tons by the year 2030. If we go to the year 2050, that's somewhere like 8.6 million tons of aluminium. At that point, we will be balanced sufficiency. The recycled aluminium will be able to supply the UK industry. Step upstream a bit. The scrap processing, now these are the people that collect the scrap from the councils, from waste sites, process it is fairly well established. We've got a very, very good infrastructure, and they have reasonable sorting capabilities, so they can sort out other metals, organics, inorganics. But that is a well-established structure at the moment. In terms of recycling, the UK is very, very fortunate in that we've got a furnace smelting designer manufacturer. We've got people that make the flux and the salts that we use to purify the aluminium, and refractory manufacturers. So technically, the whole recycling industry is well supported and well positioned. Next slide, please. The big threat to the UK is the transition from gas to renewable electricity. As I said, most of the recycling furnaces are gas-fired. If we're going to go to electricity, we've got to develop induction, possibly reduction, resistance heating, but principally induction heating. That there's an opportunity if a new furnace designs go away from the traditional furnaces. The use of induction opens up technologies like Rio castings to produce very, very high strength, high fatigue parts. There's also the possibility of integrated recycling and casting plants. So you start off with sorting the metal, melting it, and actually casting it into liquid metal transfer. The industry, there's a whole lot of development research opportunities in tighter control, in narrow melt temperature ranges, developing lowest melting technologies, reducing drosses, and waste heat energy recovery is a whole virgin territory. We've spoken about electricity, but hydrogen and hydrogen dilution are major possibilities and need to be explored, and there's not a lot of work going on at the moment. Next slide, please. Now, in terms of aluminium usage, the good news or the bad news is the construction industry, buildings, facades, windows, is a dominant user of aluminium, very, very roughly about 25%. The bad news is, or the good news is, when the aluminium goes into the construction, it's got a life of 75 years, probably 100 years. Effectively, we are storing the aluminium, but we're storing the carbon. Increasingly, packaging and automotive are now starting to increase demand. So we see transport at about 25%, and packaging is somewhere around 7%, but dramatically growing. And the use of automotive and packaging means that the recycling will be driven. Automotive cars have a 15-year life, packaging a year. So more and more automotive, more and more packaging is going to drive recycling with very, very short recycling intervals. Next slide, please. Now, at the moment, the aluminium industry, we're seeing growth across absolutely every sector. So if we start off with primary aluminium for electrical, for foils, for body in white. At the moment, as it comes back in, it cascades down. So we recycle aluminium, very well established thing, but we tend to cascade down. So packaging might go into body in white might go into extrusions, into plate, and eventually it goes into castings. And at the moment, the biggest user of castings in the UK is automotive engine, internal combustion. It's the bottom of the tier. That in itself has problems because it is bringing high iron content alloys into the recycling chain, and we're running problems with grain refining and poisoning already. So at the moment, we cascade down. But with the demise of the automotive industry, that is not going to be an option. Next slide, please. We need to change from downcycling to upcycling. The big demands that are growing are going to be packaging, body in white, electrical. These require high purity, low tramp aluminium. So we're going to see more and more upcycling. That means that we did need to develop the sorting techniques. So the aluminium being sorted at the moment will be sorted into a series or rough aluminium. We now need sorting techniques that will take all the incoming scrap and sort it into an alloy grade. If you can sort into an alloy grade, it's a simple matter of remelting and segregation. Because we've got downstream, we need to develop purification of higher alloys. So we need to look at de-ironing, dezincification, demagnesium. And the world is facing problems with alloying elements, escalating prices of silicon, copper, magnesium shortages. China is dominating magnesium. We need to do a lot of alternative research into alternative alloying elements to make sure that we can control the aluminium industry in the UK. Next slide, please. In terms of alloying developments, fundamentally, we have to stop proliferation of new alloys. There are new alloying elements coming into the arena like scandium. We need to understand why we'd want to use them. We need to develop uni-alloys. These are alloys that can be used into sheet, flat product, extrusion, castings. We need higher strength alloys, particularly for the automotive, 500 megapascals, 750 megapascals. And there's an area that aluminium at the moment is completely fledgling, which is powder technology, additive manufacturing. We need to develop not only alloys for powder manufacturing, but the powder production itself. Complete gap at the moment in the UK. Next slide, please. We need to stop losing aluminium. We've got to eliminate destructive applications. And the first thing we have to do is stop exporting scrap aluminium. We export about 400,000 tons a year. That is exporting energy. Aluminium is still finding its way into landfill, partly because we haven't educated people, partly because some councils are not segregating and sorting it. If it goes into an incinerator, it ends up as bottom ash. Huge amount of work needs to be done on recovering not only aluminium, but other metals from bottom ash. Aluminium is used in pyrotechnics as thermite fuels. It's used as a steel deoxidant. If it goes into steel, it's lost. There are applications like laminates. If you pick up your tomato sauce bottle, the seal is a plastic laminate, an aluminium plastic. That will end up in the bin and into landfill. Aluminium is used as seals. And whenever it's used on a seal, you pull off, it's 90% plastic, a little bit of aluminium, that ends up in the bin. Look at the milk bottle tops. It's used in things as sprayed metal coatings, aluminized. That just gets lost. And it is used as a colorant in paint, plastic, and pigments. All of these are destructive applications. The good news with aluminium is 75% of all aluminium is still in use. Next slide, please. With aluminium, and it's not only aluminium, but metals, we need to understand longevity. And the first thing is, whenever we put together something, we need to design it for dismantling. Look how much aluminium is in your laptop and in your phone. How the hell are you going to dismantle it? The metals need to be focused on the anticipated life. They have to be reused, designed for reuse. The automotive industry is starting to do this, where parts are stripped down from cars that are models that are expired, but with perfectly good mechanical parts, reuse. The incredible corrosion resistance of aluminium means in incredibly long lifetimes. with minimal maintenance. That needs to be exploited. I keep coming down to stop alloy proliferation, but we need to select alloys strictly for a purpose, and we need to minimize the number of alloys. In a car, in a television, in your laptop, aluminium and other parts should be labeled and identified for recycling or stripping down. And in things like buildings, CDM regulations tell you what needs to be recycled and how. We need to apply that concept across wider industry. Next slide, please. There are some fundamental projects that we ought to explore. And fundamentally, when we recycle aluminium, we melt it, and then we cool it, and then it goes into extrusion or a forging or a casting. So we heat it back up and use it. We need to look at integrated single plant operations. So we sort, recycle, process, produce body in white sheet or slab in a continuous operation without cooling it. Liquid metal transfers. Certainly with casting opportunities, possibility with rolling mills. No one has done it with wire, and no one's done it with extrusion. Big opportunities. Next slide, please. One of the things about recycling is, at the moment, there are so many ridiculous, almost criminal claims made about recycled aluminium. As Alfred, we come across greenwashing almost every week, people making completely unsubstantiated claims. None of the legal bodies in the UK are interested. We fundamentally need a transparent universal certification scheme that certifies recycled aluminium. That needs a defined standard. We need to define what is embedded carbon. When we recycle aluminium, is its carbon content starting with the stuff out the ground, or through electric producing, or through coal? We need to define what embedded carbon is. There needs to be a distinction between in-process scrap, scrap that never leaves a rolling mill, and end-of-life scrap. We need a method of calculating embedded carbon, a certified method. More importantly, we need UK legislation which is legally enforced. And the last thing is we need a proper green labelling scheme. Okay. I'm finished.
Super.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. That was excellent. So here's a man in the know, and you know, we've got some excellent challenges that this innovation network can look at tackling. Okay, so next up is Tom Giddings, Executive Director from the Aluminium Packaging Recycling Organization, AluPro. Over to you, Tom.
Thank you very much, AJ. And thank you, Jan. That was a fantastic overview. And you've saved me from having to go through some of the technical elements, which I can only thank you for. So it'll help streamline my presentation. So if you would go on to the next slide, please, AJ. So today I'm going to be focused on packaging, particularly as a sector. Jan did a great job there of outlining some of the challenges around the sector generally. I'm going to dive in on my portfolio specifically, but obviously the issues that we see in packaging, which is the fast-moving element of aluminium, we're going to see it in other sectors, just played out over longer timescales, essentially. So, what am I going to cover today? Quick overview of the market and the recycling performance to date. We're in a good place, could be better. I'll outline that a little bit more now. A succinct look at the opportunities and challenges facing packaging, specifically aluminium packaging, specifically in the UK over the next kind of 5 to 10 years. And some areas of collaboration that we're interested in, but it's not going to be an exhaustive list by any stretch. You know, we're open to everything. So next slide, please, AJ. So the obligatory slide, I mean, who are AluPro? I'm not going to do a plug necessarily, but I'll just explain who we are for those who don't know. We're a not-for-profit, industry-funded organization. We've over 30 years experience representing the UK's aluminium packaging industry. Our mission is quite simple. It's quite refined, but it doesn't make it any less hard to achieve. We want to get 100% recycling rate, or as close to it as possible, for aluminium packaging. There's been a huge amount of progress since AluPro has been in existence. Recycling has risen up the agenda with people, with governments, just with virtually every stakeholder. It's become ever more important, and we've seen an accompanying rise in aluminium packaging rates, recycling rates. But it's certainly got a growing profile. Just on the right, there is a diagram. AJ showed a really nice variation of this earlier on, which is basically the aluminium value chain. I've just highlighted our members on it here just to show that we do cover the entire value chain here. So in our capacity as the voice of the industry, we really do try and get a composite view from every sector involved in aluminium there. So in short, we lobby government, we run consumer communication programs to engage with the public. That's a huge part of what we do. We highlight the recyclability of aluminium, and we drive positive behavior change. I think that those latter three there are the core kind of raison d'etre, I suppose, for AluPro. Next slide, please, AJ. Just to put some flesh on the bones then of what's been talked about in terms of market figures and so on that Jan gave a great overview to earlier on. Around 230,000 tons of aluminium is used annually in the UK for packaging. It's a significant amount. It's not the biggest sector. It's about 15%, as Jan said, but it really does punch above its weight in terms of providing recyclates. So the recycling rate for 2020, and indeed for 2021, was 82% for beverage cans, which is the most prominent, I suppose, aluminium format for packaging. And 68% for all aluminium packaging, including everything you'll see in home. You know, you'll see your aerosols, your foil trays, tubes, and closures on wine bottles, and so on. So it really does cover the whole gamut. And we're doing well. 68% is not to be sniffed at, and certainly we've seen a huge improvement over the last 5 years. That's gone up by about 10%, I would say. But so is the market. You know, we've seen tens of percent growth in the market for aluminium packaging, again, as Jan outlined. So we're really seeing that these fast-paced, fast-moving sectors really stepping up here and becoming more popular with companies, with consumers, because of these circularity credentials. A graph on the right there just shows really the importance of packaging. This is globally. These are global figures from the International Aluminium Institute from last year. They show that packaging there is, apart from maybe transport and casting, but certainly it is the most biggest contributor to post-consumer scrap supply globally. It really does provide that level of recycled input to keep the system flowing through. And that's a key objective. The industry, regardless of whether you're a packaging manufacturer, a roller, a brand, or even indeed a recycler, what you want is more post-consumer scrap to come through in closed loops. It brings down your footprint, it drives circularity, and it's a great selling point. Next slide, please. So this is the packaging life cycle for virtually any packaging, but I've used it here just to illustrate some of the problems and some of the focus areas that we're starting to see. So like many products, we and many different trade associations, we look at the entire life cycle of a product. What I've highlighted in the red circles there are the biggest loss points of aluminium from the process. So although aluminium is infinitely suited to recyclability and recycling, we still lose tonnages. We lose a lot from purchase, after consumption, either people not disposing of it properly, or it being lost in some other way to the system. Once it makes its way around the loop to sorting, we'll lose some through two main reasons: really small particles getting lost, fine bits of wrapping foil and that type of thing, or for confectionery, or indeed bonded composites aluminium packaging, which is not ideal. And lastly, we'll lose a very small amount during the recycling process, just as part of the process losses, but that's a very efficient process in general. So those are the three key areas. And I've expanded on those to think about the opportunities and challenges. If you could go on to the next slide, please, AJ. So these are the areas that AluPro considers to be really important in our membership, but there are, again, this is not an exhaustive list. There's lots of, there's a lot happening at the moment in the space. So I'll start with the good opportunities. People are really important here. Consumers for packaging are one of the key limiting factors to how much scrap we can get back. So we have an opportunity here to engage consumers to get them to recycle consistently. We want positive behavior change. We want higher capture rates. We've been doing that for, well, certainly the last 30 years that AluPro has been in existence, and we've really ramped that up in the last 5 to 10 years. But there's still more to do. People still need to hear about why they should recycle all their metal packaging, but specifically their aluminium. There's opportunities for technologies that will economically, that's a key word there, recycle all elements of multi-material packages where they can't be designed out, of course. We have eco-design guidelines. You look at other sectors like plastics and flexibles, and they're looking at how they move to monomaterial. That is one way of doing it, but it doesn't eliminate every application, doesn't eliminate every package on the market. So we still need to recycle, and in a proper circular economy, recycling is your end goal. There is no landfill. There is no waste. You have to make sure you get all the resources back. So we need to account for that. But if we get that right, we get new jobs. We can process this end-of-life packaging into higher value raw materials. Back to what Jan was saying about upcycling, we want to avoid going down through the loops there and actually keep it at the same or higher economic value to the system. If we get this right, of course, we get greater volumes of higher quality scrap. This is great. We get more post-consumer aluminium input. We get decarbonized aluminium through increased recycling content and therefore higher recycling rates. All these things are great news, but they come with challenges, right? So packaging in particular, there's a lot happening in the legislation space at the moment around producer responsibility, about making sure that companies are now being held to account for the packaging they place on the market. There's higher recycling targets as a result, just for aluminium. For non-beverage aluminium, so not cans, there's a 50% target for 2030. That means we need to collect and recycle, indeed, another 10 to 15,000 tons per year than we are now. That's not an insubstantial number. The deposit return scheme for the UK, which is being staggered in its implementation throughout the home nations over the next, say, 3 to 4 years, it's going to significantly change the composition of aluminium recycling stream. Most sorting and recycling infrastructure is optimized for beverage cans. If we remove those, because people are all of a sudden going to be putting them in a parallel system, that means that other formats face some obstacle. Smaller sizes, presence of other materials that can really hamper the sortability, I suppose, and reduce the likelihood of those recyclable products getting to the recycler. We get losses in the middle there at the sorting stage. And coming back around to consumers, how do we get over 90% of consumers to recycle? We know they don't do it now.
Don't use refill.
So where is the greatest point of leverage? Consumers control how much scrap is ultimately available. They're the first gate of the circular economy. Next slide, please, AJ. And I'll just got one more after this. So I've got, there's a picture around. This is a bale from, this is from Germany, but this is a collected aluminium bale after a DRS has been implemented. And what we see here collected from the curbside is a bit of a mix. We've got lots of different things in there. You can see plastics, you can see composite materials, and there is not a particularly good destination for this apart from pyrolysis. We don't have pyrolysis plants in the UK that are widely deployed. There's not much capacity in Europe to export our waste to them. So what we should be looking to do is avoid this situation. We should be looking to design out problematic packaging. We should be looking to have segregation of these different formats so they go to the right recycling solution. Next slide, please, AJ. So what do we think are the most important areas? What don't we know? Or what do we know we don't know? I think that's a Colin Powell thing. But we need to understand consumer behavior even more than we do now. What are the greatest influences on people's decisions to recycle? When do people make those decisions? And how, most importantly, how do we leverage it? How do we make them do the right thing? We need to maximize the yields and minimize the losses in the sorting and recycling processes. Jan has talked a little bit in detail about that, so I won't linger on that point, but it's good work that's going on now that needs to continue. And then we've got 2 points around new technology. How do we economically, is that word again, separate aluminium from other materials in composite packs? How do we sort and segregate by alloy? How do we therefore maximize the chances of getting aluminium from, say, recovered from IBA? How do we get those back into closed loop processes and not destructive processes, as Jan put it? So there's just some areas, but there's lots of different levers that we can pull. But I guess those are the highest priority ones that our members are thinking about at the moment in that value chain loop. So that's it for me. Try to keep it short and snappy. Thank you very much, AJ, and thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Tom. That was extremely interesting. Now I'm just going to do a presentation exchange. If you just bear with me for a sec. I don't want to do that. Okay. Are you able to see a Jaguar Land Rover screen? Can someone tell me?
Not yet on my slide.
Okay, just one sec. Are you now able to see a Jaguar Land Rover?
Yes, we are.
Great stuff.
Excellent. So if I could hand over to Oliver Hawkins from Jaguar Land Rover, we're going to get the end user perspective. Over to you, Oliver.
Brilliant. Thanks, AJ. Great to hear from the experts in the industry so far. Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. As just mentioned, I'm Oliver Hawkins, a Senior Sustainability Engineer at Jaguar Land Rover within the Product Sustainability team. Our team's main focus is looking at, but not limited to, decarbonisation pathways for different materials in the product, myself specifically looking at aluminium and steel. Today I'm going to go through JLR's ambitions and a couple of case studies from the perspective of the end user of aluminium ourselves. Next slide, please, AJ. To set the scene very quickly, it's worth taking through some of JLR's targets and commitments that we've recently made. So firstly, last February, our CEO Thierry Bolloré announced JLR's new strategy, the Reimagine strategy. And a key focus of this is the decarbonisation of our business towards a net zero future. And as you can see there, the aim is to achieve net zero carbon emissions across our supply chain, products and operations by 2039. Next slide, please. As well as our 2039 targets, JLR have recently publicly announced our science-based target, and we're aiming to reduce our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 46%, so the emissions that we own, and then scope 3 emissions, including both purchased goods and services, so our upstream impact, and the use phase, our downstream impact, by 54% by 2030. This is key. It's a shorter term target to align our trajectory to net zero. And a key thing to identify from this is that the life cycles of the vehicles that we're engineering today will run through this 2030 timeline. So they have to be capable of achieving this 2030 target when they launch. Excuse me, next slide, please. So as mentioned, we as a business need to reduce our CO2 footprint over the next 17 years. Aluminium is a key material to Jaguar Land Rover and is used in every product that we produce to varying degrees. Because of this, aluminium is a large contributor to JLR's overall CO2 footprint and generally has a larger CO2 footprint per kilogram versus other structural metals, for example, such as steel. However, due to its lightweight properties and stiffness, we cannot simply switch everything to steel, so we need to investigate and work towards decarbonisation of the material itself. Next slide, please. So what levers can we actually pull to address the impact of value? And this has been referenced in the previous presentations, that kind of shows that we're on the same path, which is good. Firstly, we can look at procuring low carbon prime aluminium to actually reduce the impact of the primary content within our products. And that could be through renewable energy, for example, during the refinery process. However, this kind of carries potential cost increase or cost implications. And there's also the risk of actually access to that material itself. From a JLR perspective, we can further investigate new grades of aluminium or new conditions of value to allow for down gauging opportunities, for example, therefore reducing weight and embedded CO2. And we can also do things such as design for utilization or increase utilization to actually reduce the amount of material we use altogether. Risk, and not so much risk, but cost implication, investment, resource, timings to validate these new grades for launch of next gen products. And then finally, which is what we're going to go into more detail on, we can increase the secondary content in the material. You can probably see the trend here that again, there's potential cost implications and also validation of the material. And then finally, access to scrap material could be the potential risks. Overall, the key themes, almost risk to the solutions, are cost and availability. So we've got to address both of these if we're to increase our secondary content in our products. Next slide, please. So if we hone in on that secondary content, we need to find a solution to the risk to the solution. The way we do this, quite simply, is obviously producing a closed loop system for aluminium. Nothing groundbreaking here. It's already been touched on, but it's worth still reiterating. So within my team, one of our key objectives, as well as global warming potential reduction, is to encourage and influence circularity in our products. We must galvanize our value chain, significantly increase recycling, remanufacturing, and reuse within our product's life cycle. We must remove, or at the very least reduce, the need to mine further raw materials. And what we need is to produce across our supply chain is a closed loop circular economy, utilizing both post-industrial and post-consumer scrap for automotive grade aluminium. And this includes sheet, castings, extrusions, the works. By creating a closed loop system, we can reduce those risks of access to scrap material and also potentially reduce costs due to not needing to mine those raw materials. And selfishly, that's the key for Jaguar Land Rover towards a net zero future. Next slide, please. So I think it's worth looking at previous projects that have been carried out at Jaguar Land Rover. The really obvious and successful one has been our real car project. The real car project premise was to utilize post-industrial scrap from Jaguar Land Rover in tier 1 press shops as a feedstock for a revised aluminium sheet grade. We developed a revised alloy, RC5754, which offered an increase in secondary content utilizing press shop scrap. Obviously, when we stamp components, we do not run at 100% utilization. So instead of sending this scrap back to the market for recycling, we almost wanted to take control to ensure it went back to our supplier to be remelted back into our product for ourselves. This meant that we had to cleanly segregate between 5 and 6 series. Before the project, I don't believe that was the case, and that was one of the key issues that we had to overcome. It was no small project, and it brought together customer side from ourselves, suppliers, tier 1 stampers, logistical issues, and also academia in order to succeed. Engineering validation, material segregation, and logistic management were key to the project's success. And it has, and I think this is a real success of it, up until 2020, saved over 220,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent, which is equivalent to driving almost 2 billion kilometres in a passenger vehicle. No small feat. The project has also allowed for the development of other projects, or at least the research into other projects, such as Reality. Research by the Reality team has revealed how an innovative recycling process could upcycle aluminium waste from household appliance and end-of-life vehicles to the post-consumer into the premium cars of the future. And this has initially shown potential to reduce production CO2 emissions by around 26%. Next slide, please. So some of the lessons learned that we took from Realcar, it's very fair to say that the project was a success and should definitely be celebrated across the industry. It showed implementation of increased secondary content grade for our products. I think it's worth saying it was an excellent example of collaboration across the industry, and more importantly, collaboration across the industry as part of a government-funded project. It's also really obviously worked in the sense it's successfully demonstrated closed-loop aluminium in certain grades. And again, it's reduced the global warming potential / CO2 impact versus its predecessor grade. Another positive of the revised grade is today, actually, we use this in every vehicle, and it's also used across our industry by other OEMs. So we haven't kept all the learning to ourselves. It has been shared across the industry. And finally, not so much a lessons learned, but it's important to say that actually during the project, there were minor modifications to the grade to accommodate this recycled content. And this had to go through vigorous material validation through our materials engineering team, including things such as press trials, line trials, etc. Next slide, please. So I suppose what it's kind of all leaning towards is what's next. So we look at the past of Realcar and our current situation and what can we do further now. So we are, as a JLR, with our suppliers, working on the development of further grades to further increase secondary content with our key suppliers. We are investigating potentially a complete 6 series vehicle as a research project rather than a mix between 5 and 6 series. An example here could be for the hood of a vehicle, which at the moment I believe has a 6 series outer and a 5 series inner. If we were to turn that into a 6 series product completely, it would be a more homogeneous product to aid us in designing for circularity. Plus an extra bonus is with the 6 series, it contains slightly less magnesium, as touched on earlier. We know magnesium has a high CO2 content, and again, access to material can be an issue, as we saw over the past year. We're continuing to research into reality to understand the impacts of post-consumer material onto our products. We'll be working closely with our suppliers to ensure validation of the grades where we're increasing secondary content. We're actually requesting an increase in secondary content for certain components for use in our next architecture that's currently in development now. And then a little bit is we want to understand how we can improve the decontamination of scrap for end-of-life components. Not something I personally know much about, so hopefully in the sessions after this, I can learn a bit more about that from a selfish point of view. Finally, I think this is an important one as part of this event today, one that this forum and the delegates involved here can really help with. Can we produce across the aluminium industry further consortiums? We know that they're available, but to align commonality of products. If we could see things such as reduction in supply-specific IPs, which could allow for innovation across the industry with knowledge being shared freely. We need to be really clear if this is important to us, i.e. closed loop and reduction in environmental footprint. We cannot work in silos. This isn't just to our supply base in the industry, but to ourselves as Jaguar Land Rover. And like I said, we have seen this for the RC 5754 grade, where knowledge was shared across the industry. We as a group here must work together to produce realistic, scalable solutions to upcycle and limit our environmental potential moving forward. And if there's one thing I really want you to take, it's that collaboration is harmony, and we've got to embrace it for a better planet moving forward. Next slide. I think that's everything from myself. I've tried to do that as quickly as possible. Again, thank you all very much for taking time out of your busy schedules to join, and thank you for the organisers.
Thank you very much, Oliver. That was very interesting perspective from an end user. Okay, we're going to go back to the main deck. I hope you can see that. And next up, excuse me. Yes, there we go. Next up, we have Elle Runton, my colleague Elle Runton, who is going to talk about the program that we are about to embark on. Over to you, Elle.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, everyone. As AJ said, my name is Elle. I'm leading on the rollout of the Circular Economy Innovation Network. Just take a second to say thank you to all the presenters this morning for some really great content, and thank you for joining us. I'm going to share with you a little bit more about the newly launched Circular Economy Network and the tools and enablers that could help us accelerate circular economy in the UK. Next slide, please. I think we've seen from everybody else's slides, we're pretty much agreed on what a circular economy is in terms of designing out waste and pollution, keeping products and materials in at their highest value while protecting nature as we undertake our industrial processes. Next slide. So the Circular Economy Innovation Network has 3 key areas in its scope at the moment. One of those is circular design, circular business models, and recovery systems. And the purpose of today's session is to listen to your thoughts, to capture your challenges, your barriers, your opportunities, your threats, be they technical. Is it about regulation and policy? Is it about skills? Is it about behavior change? And the way that we'll do this today is using the online forum of Menti and the breakout rooms. So you'll be asked to join a breakout room, and you'll be asked to give your opinion either verbally or through typing in on screen. Through the course of this year, there'll be the opportunity to review the value chain mapping and the material flows, start to identify the breaks in the link, as we saw from Ollie's and Tom's presentations. And to do this, we'll have a series of 4 workshops, and they're designed to stimulate knowledge sharing, to look at solution scoping, and really start to build that collaboration. Next slide, please. So a bit of an eye chart here. Please don't try and read all of the detail. I'll take you on the journey for this year. On that left-hand side, you can see there phase 1, which not surprisingly is where we are today in June. We're having our first kick-off workshop, the opportunity to listen to you, to hear your thoughts and validate the assumptions that we've made around the political framework, sector drivers, and identify any knowledge gaps. And as we prepare for phase 2, we'll be identifying specific challenges and started to filter those as we work together to define the circular economy vision for aluminium and address some of the focus areas for innovation challenges, which of course then will start to form the action plan and recommendations. Phase 3 is about understanding what the innovation solutions are and how might they be scalable and what funding might be needed in order to bring those to reality. And some of the tools that we might choose to use in that would be the Innovation Exchange Programme or the Knowledge Partnership Programmes, or more excitingly, start right with a blank piece of paper and say, here's our design challenge. If we could create the There'll be another opportunity to engage then in the third workshop as we start to then look at a stakeholder review and define that against the circular economy criteria. Phase 4 is what's taking us to our community challenge and our solution outcomes, where we have the opportunity really to understand which sectors and industries might benefit. What areas of innovation should we be focusing on? What role does the Innovate UK KTN network have to play? And what is the legacy handover? So that if this programme finishes at the end of Q1 next year, how do we make sure there's the opportunity to continue this work? We're also going to be launching, as Emma mentioned, the Knowledge Hub content for you to be able to use as a repository for materials. Next slide, please. So the Circular Economy Innovation Network is really aiming to connect problems and solutions. And through Innovate UK KTN's global and UK network, we have the opportunity to access tools such as knowledge transfer partnerships, to be able to employ the innovation network across the diverse communities. And that includes research academia and business, working through a forum called Knowledge Transfer Partnerships. And we'll look at each of those in detail as we go through. But I think it's really important, we've heard from all the speakers today, how we don't just take insight, but we create action plans that will deliver impact on the ground. And we could do that perhaps through innovation exchanges, where we're connecting innovators, funders, and collaborators, or indeed through a collaboration exchange. And let's have a look at how this might work on the next slide. So new this year is the collaboration exchange, and this is very much about addressing sector challenges, academia through that value chain collaboration for longer term partnership working. The criteria for this programme is that the challenge must address any of the sustainability goals. So in our context today, for example, it might be SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. It could be SG 13, climate action, or indeed SG 14, life in water. But this programme, the Collaboration Exchange, is targeted at enabling emerging technologies, but those that are not yet ready for commercialisation. Next slide. So the Innovation Exchange is really about connecting large organisations, manufacturers, and indeed sometimes local authorities with those challenges to solve on a limited time. And it's often the case where large organisations have low exposure to companies outside of their existing supply chains. Conversely, you find solution providers find it difficult to open the right doors or indeed to present their tech to the right part of the ecosystem as part of their own go-to-market strategy. So the Innovation Exchange is designed to link technical challenge opportunities with innovators who have market-ready solutions. And we'll have a look at the examples of that on the next slide. So here on the right-hand side here for the Innovation Exchange, you can see some of the entities that have been involved in the network. But as a summary level, and to make sure I keep us to time, we have a team of 200 cross-sector experts across things such as energy, artificial intelligence, machine learning, manufacturing, digital, materials, and design. We have a network of 100,000 solution providers, and often they're fully funded projects across urban systems and energies. And we'll talk about these either in breakouts, through questions, or outside of this forum. Always happy to take questions. Next slide. Thanks, AJ. So the Knowledge Transfer Partnership is an opportunity to link businesses with not-for-profit organisations. Link businesses and or not-for-profit organisations with universities or research organisations. And that also is linking with a sustainably qualified graduate to lead, change and deliver innovation, taking the work from an academic world and applying it into a real world situation. And they do this really by connecting a business that has an innovation idea with the expertise to help deliver it, understand what's needed for scale, and then start to work on that go-to-market strategy. And we'll see a couple of examples of that on the next slide. So the Knowledge Transfer Partnership, you can see here on the right, a couple of the things that have been brought to fruition there around agri-food and innovation on food resilience. And also a really interesting one there around adapting AI in manufacturing and how to close knowledge gaps. And that was a program that's partly run but continuing throughout the rest of this year in conjunction with the Knowledge Transfer Partnership and the Manufacturing Made Smarter Innovation Network. And that process there will deliver 2 virtual interactive sessions where businesses from all sectors have the opportunity to explore AI within their real world operations. The network has 800 businesses, 100 knowledge bases and 800 graduates who are keen to work on collaborative partnerships. And that may well be a solution that we take forward. Coming on to my last slide, please, now. You'll be all delighted to know. The Circular Economy Innovation Network offers businesses the opportunity to lower costs, to look at new profit streams and to create new jobs. And we've heard that already from our presenters. And some of you may remember RAP UK estimated around about 500,000 new jobs by 2023. And the Innovation Network will focus on circular design, ask the question listening earlier around what is the role for aluminium in a reuse model? What is the role on refill models? We'll also focus on circular recovery, and some questions that may have been in your mind were what is the role on blockchain in traceability and making sure that we keep the value from those materials in the system. And we'll also look at circular economy business models. So if you're moving away from recycling and you're coming further up in that value chain, trying to understand that material flow, before you get to compressing or before you get to shredding, how do we recover that value? And I think both Jan and Ollie touched on that around body in white parts. What is the role for technology in dismantling those? And I think you probably all remember the test study on the first introduction a number of years ago now around aluminium into lorry cabs, starting to reduce the weight of the vehicle, reducing drag by 12%, obviously with fuel savings, but CO2 emissions fell 5%. And Ollie touched on that. So a really interesting case study there. So I think my closing statement here is that the circular economy clearly offers a compelling framework for systems change, a transformation from business as usual. But as we know, that always comes with challenges, whether you're a large organization or small organization. Circular Economy Innovation Network is here to help navigate that path. We can seek to collaborate across the value chains and learn together. We have the opportunity to stimulate innovation that will accelerate the UK's journey towards a lower carbon future. Thank you, AJ.
Okay, thank you very much. That's excellent. We're just gonna we're running a bit behind schedule, and there is a Menti session in the breakout session. So what I would suggest we do is just take a quick 5-minute break. If you want to go to the loo or grab a tea or something, and we rejoin at 11:20. It's 11:15 now, so we'll just take 5 minutes, and then we'll come back for the breakout sessions. So I hope that's okay. Welcome back to the plenary. We're going to run the feedback session now. So Emma, if you want to feedback from breakout session 1.
Yeah, thanks, AJ. We had a really interesting discussion in the room around kind of circular design and some of the state of the art and, as you know, challenges and opportunities. And some of the things that did come up was, I suppose, around kind of the big opportunities was around kind of looking at different, join-in methods, and then also kind of the use of homogeneous kind of materials within products, and really kind of the role of design in terms of easy disassembly, so would allow kind of much easier kind of separation of materials, but in particular aluminium, so we can be able to capture that, so it can be much more easily recycled, reused, or remanufactured. We also looked at kind of, as well, I think kind of one of the key things that kind of came up was you can't really think of circular design in isolation. It does link in so strongly with circular business models and also kind of circular recovery. There's some challenges around, or some challenges are seen around perhaps kind of, green premiums on products that are kind of have some of those kind of those principles being applied to them, and how do we overcome that, and how do we, and it's something that's being seen across not just the aluminium sector but other sectors as well, such as steel. So is there things in which we can do to address that? There's also some challenges around investment and being able to kind of encourage and, I suppose, provide confidence that this is an area in which investment should be, and really kind of trying to build a business case around that. And then we also as well had that chance to reflect on some projects that were delivered kind of a number of years ago by the KTN and the industry and other industries as well, around kind of material design exchange, and perhaps maybe that's something we could revisit as well. So lots of really good examples of what's going on, and some really kind of good opportunities of what we could focus on as well as we move forward. So great discussion, and thanks to everyone as well within the room that did contribute today. It was been really, really helpful. So yeah, back to you, AJ.
Thank you so much, Emma. Noha, if you could give us a summary of breakout session 2, circular recovery.
Yeah, thank you, AJ. So we started off kind of discussing what the state of the art and sort of what people are doing currently with circularity of aluminium. And a lot of themes that came up were around sort of the remanufacturing process, the reduction of waste, investigating the residual elements, impact on sort of the quality of the casting and the final product, but also retaining value throughout the value chain. Then we talked about the challenges that people are facing in this field, and in particularly in embedding circularity within the supply chain. So a lot of it has actually to do with education, collaboration, the need to kind of stop exporting scrap aluminium and bring it back into the value chain through recycling, and also to kind of raise consumer awareness about post-consumer aluminium and how it can be sort of standardized into different grades. Then we discussed sort of the opportunities arising from this, and as we can see, there's quite a lot of opportunity with sort of automation of recycling and sorting. There is an abundant supply of aluminium scrap both in the UK and the amount that we're exporting, and also that there is kind of an uptake of the culture around circular economy much more around recent years. And just a few more comments that were made during the breakout session, which is kind of the need for top-level, top-down legislative action and governmental support, and also a holistic view of sustainability that goes beyond just the carbon footprint.
That's super, Noha. Thank you so much for capturing that. And lastly, but by no means least, circular business models.
Hi, thank you, AJ. I'm going to hand over to our volunteer, Neil, who very kindly offered to facilitate. But I think one of my observations from listening today is that there's a lack of knowledge around circular economy business models and arguably a default into recycling. So I think Neil, when he takes the session, he'll talk you through some of the other discussion points.
Thank you, Al. I'll try and summarise what was actually quite a, I would say, wide-ranging discussion. And we're locked on to, in considering the sort of business models, locked on very much to the whole sort of supply chain and connectivity element. I posed a question right at the start, which Elle asked me to reiterate here, which was really just to consider whether the key drivers were in the arena of technical, i.e., the ability to conduct materials processing and the sort of metallurgy aspects and all the rest of it, whether they were in terms of accounting, absolutely sort of keeping waste material as an asset on the books rather than a liability, which would start to drive behaviours. Also, whether it is legislative, whether the DEFRA have got things right regarding the way that they appropriately or degrade and handle waste streams as still with a sort of linear consumption mentality. And in fact, I forget who made the point about the fact that consumers as a terminology actually is an interesting one and is misleading in this context. I'm not sure if I've covered a lot of the stuff that we've talked about. Elle, was there anything else that was in your mind?
No, I think that's a really great summary for now. Thank you so much, Neil, and thank you to all our participants.
Yeah, thank you, Neil, and thank you to everyone who provided an input there where it was most valuable. We're just going to give you another opportunity on Menti, actually. Michael, if you could do the honors to get anything off your chest that you haven't done so far, and then we'll wrap up. Michael, do you want to do a Menti quickly? So there it is. Any final comments, any final reflections, any thoughts? What do you want to see this program do? What do you not want to see it do? So over to you. What are these challenges and opportunities? Anything that's come up for you? Just give you a few minutes to do that. So it's, as you know, menti.com, and then you put the code in 45596461. Michael, would it be possible to keep the Menti going for a sort of 15 minutes after the end?
Yep, that's up. I'll keep this one open.
Thank you. So no rush. If you want to carry on making comments, you can do so. We'll just keep it open so other people can see what other people are writing for the moment. So there's a comment about the output. So obviously we will be taking, we've done this deliberately at the end of June because we know people are going to be on leave and away and what have you during the summer. So we'll be digesting some of this information. We may come back to some of you individually as well during the summer. And then we'll be kicking off with our program, which Elle described in vigorously from September. So we will be, we're really in a data collection sort of phase at the moment. We're trying to understand from you, the experts, what are the challenges and what you want to see. Okay, I'm going to stop share. If you could just stop sharing the screen, Michael, we'll just wrap up. So yes, thank you. We'll keep the Menti on for another 15 minutes or so. So if you want to, if you have any further thoughts, you want to write anything in that, then please do so. Just wanted to thank you really for all of your contributions. Just to remind you, Meeting Mojo is available to you. We have been in isolation, as you know, for the last few years. So this whole kind of exchanging business cards and shaking hands and all of that hasn't really happened. We hope that will change, but in the meantime you have this virtual networking platform called Meeting Mojo, and all you have to do is load your profile. We're going to keep it on from 1 o'clock this afternoon until 3 o'clock 3 o'clock this afternoon, so you've got some time to engage with your fellow participants, for your fellow delegates who have been on this call. And just remains for me to say really thank you to all of you for participating. Thank you for all the speakers who took time out to present, took time to prepare their slides and present them. If you have any questions, further questions or comments, or would like to have a chat with us, then my email address is there, and I am of course available to you. So thank you very much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Do as I say, take advantage of the Meeting Mojo platform that we have made available to you, and I wish you a pleasant rest of the afternoon and a good weekend. Thank you.